Jeff Swinehart is part of a team that helped an 86-year-old lifelong farmer stay true to his principles, even when a lot of money, got offered to him. This is a situation that might make most of us wonder, could I have turned down $15 million so that my land that's been committed to farming for so many years can remain that way? Hi, I'm Dave Price. Jeff Swinehart is president and CEO of Lancaster Farmland Trust. It's a nonprofit that has a mission of helping landowners make sure that their farm stays a farm. We will talk with Jeff this week about how the trust works and how it's grown and how it helped this 86-year-old farmer named Mervyn Rodabaugh Jr. of Cumberland County, Pennsylvania. Hey, Jeff, we appreciate the connection. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely, Dave. Happy to be here.
Hey, talk a little bit about your background. How'd you get to where you are?
So I am born and raised in Lancaster County. Grew up in the southern end of the county, rural part, close to the Susquehanna River. So as a kid, my family's friends were all farmers. So I spent a lot of time on farms as a kid. As a teenager, around 13 or 14, as I was bugging my parents that I wanted to get a part-time job, and my grandmother owned about 30 acres that she was renting out to a neighboring dairy farmer. And my dad said to me, "Well, let's go see if Bob needs a hand." So we went and talked to Bob, and Bob said, "Well, we'll give you a try."
Okay.
I worked on a dairy farm. It was about a 120 cow dairy operation all through high school, first couple of years through college. It's really where I found and grew my appreciation for agriculture, and just the appreciation for farmers and the hard work. I mean, I always like to say to young people, I think every young person should be in the top of a hay mow in the middle of August stacking hay, because if it does nothing else, it's going to build character for you, if nothing else. So that was how I got my exposure to agriculture, and then went off undergraduate, a small state school in northern part of the Commonwealth. Came home to Lancaster, landed at Lancaster Farmland Trust, and that's been 26 years ago now. It's just been a great opportunity of having a great impact on the community.
So what was your day-to-day on the dairy farm as a 13, 14-year-old? What were you doing?
Yeah, so I would arrive. So I never participated much in the milking component. So I would
Okay.
get there sort of right at the end of milking, feed the heifers, clean up,
Which
the
is
dairy
good, right? So
barn.
you didn't have to be there quite as early, right?
Yeah, yeah. I d't have to be there at 4:30 in the morning, which is
Okay.
which was pretty good. Clean up the troughs, with the leftover grain and forage from the sort of the day before. So that was, first thing in the morning. And then it was, whatever was on the agenda, middle of the summer, it could have been out, raking hay, getting ready for it to be baled, winter time, it might have been, cleaning out the calf pens, things of that nature. So it was a variety of things.
And it's impressive, I suppose, probably to your mom and dad's upbringing of you, but I mean, that's like real work as a 13,
Yeah.
14-year-old, right? I mean, that's what I think
It's
a lot of suburban kids who do not have any kind of background in this probably don't appreciate. And that's why when you were initially telling me what you're doing, I was thinking, all right, that means you're probably not getting up at 4 a.m. So that's maybe one benefit. But like this is like legit hard work that if you're doing it year round, you're doing it before school too.
Yeah, I mean you're right. I mean, it's hard work. And I think I think for me it instilled that work ethic and drive. But also it was just really enjoyable.
Hmm.
There was another full-time hired man who worked there. He was probably 15 years older than what I was. But we had a great relationship, and we would joke with each other and all those sort of things. And it was just really a rewarding experience. It didn't feel like a job. And during the school year, I would go after school. I mean, when I started driving, I would go down after school, um, a couple times throughout the week, and then work on Saturdays. But then come summertime, I was there 6 days a week, you know, putting in 60 hours or whatever it was. And um, but yeah, I mean, it's real work. It's my hands have gotten a lot softer now than what they were back then.
Working in the office is a little different, right? That makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah.
Okay, let's talk about. Uh, I want to do something that, and I'm not trying to be funny, but Lancaster
Hmm.
to outsiders could be pronounced one way. To smart people like you, I'm going to be curious how you pronounce that word. Is it Lancaster, Lancaster? Well, how do you say it?
You run it all together, it's Lancaster. So not a Lancaster. It's
Hmm.
all run together.
As a kid growing up in St. Louis, I used to watch the Cardinal games, and there was a guy who played for the Cardinals in the 80s named Tom Herr, and he grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And that is the only reason why I'm aware of that because I remember how they said it, and I'm thinking, dang, that's not, does that make sense? Is that how you pronounce that word? I don't know. Anyway, all
Yeah,
right, so go ahead.
well, it's easy to tell when somebody's not from Lancaster
I'm
because
sure.
I mean you go Lancaster and everybody goes,
Lancaster.
Yep, you're not from around here."
Okay, so talk about the Lancaster Farmland Trust. What's that all about, and how did this thing start?
Yeah, so we're Lancaster Farmland Trust is a 38-year-old private nonprofit land trust. So we were established back, it was 1988. So if you think about farmland preservation, um, in Pennsylvania, farmland preservation really started in Lancaster County. So at the county level, the county commissioners and other leaders in the community at that point in time developed the farmland preservation program in Lancaster County. That was at about 1980, I believe, but it never received any funds until like 1983. But those same leaders recognized that if we were going to be successful with farmland preservation in Lancaster County, because we had such a large plain sect, so old order Amish, conservative Mennonite farming community, that
Mhm.
having a non-governmental alternative was really going to be important. And that's how Lancaster Farmland Trust got started. And since that point in time, we've preserved 618 farms to date. It's over 38,000 acres. But 85% of our work is within the plain community, primarily the older Amish community. Um, but so that's how we got started. It was the vision of those pioneers recognizing that government program alone was not going to be sufficient to achieve the long-term objective of farmland preservation in Lancaster County.
That that dialogue and relationship has to be fascinating, right, with the Amish community?
It is. It is. Like anything, farmland preservation started out very slow and very, I would say, suspect by a lot of farmers. You're referencing baseball. So Gene Garber, who was a major league relief
The
pitcher,
Braves.
was very active. His family was very active in farmland preservation in Lancaster County,
Okay.
and were some of the first to preserve their farms up in the Donegal region, which is the northwestern part of the county. And they had neighbors that said, the Garbers can move to the west, or to the Midwest, but don't stop there. Just keep going further west because it won't be far enough. Because people just thought it was radical, this concept of placing permanent restrictions on land and preventing it from being developed. And ironically, 40 years later, a lot of those neighbors have since preserved their farms.
Hmm.
But it was a radical concept, and especially in the Plain community, it was a radical concept, and it took 10 to 15 years before we really started seeing, I would say, fairly wide adoption or acceptance of the program, especially in the Plain community.
So, for folks who aren't familiar with this, can you explain what exactly preservation, what that process and what that means?
Yeah, so it's essentially a real estate transaction, and it's a voluntary basis. So, farm families are approaching us, and their desire is to ensure that their farm always stays available for agricultural use and doesn't get converted into shopping center or warehouses, data center, housing development, whatever the case might be. And what we do is we place a restrictive covenant on that property. It's called a conservation easement, is the legal term. And it functions just like any other easement. So, you own a piece of property, maybe there's a utility line that comes across your property. That utility company has an easement for that utility line. And it says, utility company, you can maintain, you can repair, all those sort of things. Our easements basically say the property stays open and available for agricultural use. And it starts placing limitations on number of subdivisions that can occur, number of additional dwellings that can be constructed, and removes commercial, industrial uses of the property. So really keeping it solely for an agricultural purpose.
And what if ownership changes? What happens?
Yeah, good question. So the easement gets attached to the title of the property. So regardless of ownership, that easement carries with that chain, that title of the property. So farm is preserved. It can be sold, passed down to family members, can be sold at public auction. Whoever buys it then is subject to that easement. And as a 501(c)(3) nonprofit organization, those easements have to be perpetual in nature. That's a requirement of the IRS. So when we say we preserve the farm, it's preserved forever. And Lancaster Farmland Trust, as the holder of that easement, we take on that perpetual responsibility of monitoring, stewarding, and in the rare cases, enforcing that conservation easement.
Is that challenged frequently?
It's not challenged frequently. There's very few cases in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania where an easement has been challenged. And every time it has been challenged, the easement has been successful in terms of withstanding that challenge, and the courts have looked very favorable to those perpetual documents.
And I'm sure you follow what's going on across the country too, as we are seeing fewer farms, bigger farms, urban sprawl, data centers coming up, and we'll talk specifically about a data center
Mhm.
case that you all are helping a gentleman with in a couple of minutes. But is that, are all of these developments, is that increasing the interest and questions that you all are getting as people try to figure out, hey, I want to preserve the integrity and the legacy of this land? Is that becoming more commonplace?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting in a place like Lancaster. While most of our work is inside Lancaster County, and we do some work outside of Lancaster County, but
Okay.
general terms, we talk about Lancaster is a unique place in the context that we lead the nation in farmland preservation. There's more farms and acres preserved in Lancaster County than any other county in the nation. Right
Hmm.
now, it's over 1,600 farms. It's 125,000 acres. It's about 32% of all of our ag zone farmland in the county. And what we have heard specifically, say, from like solar developers, is they can't amass enough of land because our parcel size here is really fragmented. The average size farm in Lancaster County is 75 acres. So relatively small, especially
Hmm.
compared to the Midwest.
Sure.
And they can't mass enough acreage to actually have utility scale solar because when they try and amass that one, it's a lot of fragmentation, a lot of different landowners, but they start bumping into preserved farms
Hmm.
that it's just not feasible, in that particular use. We certainly have seen warehouse development along some of the major transportation corridors, which is applying pressure there. I think that is driving some motivation of farm families who want to see their land permanently protected. I would say the other thing that we see in Lancaster is, the agricultural heritage, the culture of it here. Like agriculture is a part of the community, even though someone might not actively be engaged in agriculture. They're not a farmer, they don't work in the
Hmm.
industry, but it is so prominent across the landscape that everybody takes sort of ownership and pride of that. So, as an example, it's, 90% plus when we do public opinion polls that people are very favorable to farmland preservation. So it's like it's rooted in sort of the culture here of that's what we do, is we preserve our farmland. We don't develop it, unnecessarily. Obviously, there's a balance to reach there between growth and farmland preservation.
Sure.
But in in the community, when there is the proposal to convert agricultural land to some other use, generally speaking, there's a lot of opposition in the
Hmm.
community that comes out from that.
Okay, so let's talk specifically about this older farmer, and I'm curious how you two connected. So he gets offered 60,000 an acre or so for his farm, and that's a lot of money, right? I mean,
Yeah,
if it all goes through, that you're talking 15, 16 million bucks. I mean, that's a
right.
lot of that's a lot of temptation if you're thinking about getting out, especially for a guy in his late 80s. So how did this conversation initiate, and then we can get to how you help this guy.
Yeah, so this particular farm owned by Mervyn Rodbaugh is located in Cumberland County, so northwest of Lancaster County, close to Harrisburg. Pennsylvania would be, the landmark there. Located in Silver Spring Township. So Silver Spring Township, 10 plus years ago, um, the voters approved basically via referendum an open space fund. So essentially, the voters said we want to increase the personal income tax on ourselves, and we want those funds restricted for land conservation, whether it's farmland preservation or natural space preservation. And we have been, Lancaster Farmland Trust, we have been a nonprofit partner with Silver Spring Township when they are pursuing farmland preservation projects. So that's how we got connected with Mervyn is the one supervisor there. Her name's Laura Brown, who's, the champion of this program at the local level and is the local representative who's really sensing like interest from landowners or making those connections. And Mervyn was interested in preserving his farm. He explored the county farmland preservation program and determined it wasn't the best fit for him. And we see
Yeah.
that from time to time. And it's really critical where having that nonprofit land trust partner doing farmland preservation is really critical in a community. And in Cumberland County, there's not a Cumberland County Farmland Preservation Trust like there is a Lancaster Farmland Trust. So there is a gap there that we've seen not only in Silver Spring Township, but across the county itself. It just so happens in Silver Spring, it's a little unique because there's dollars that are there. So that's how we initially got connected with Merv and his connection with the township.
Okay, so then how did you put this agreement together to protect his land?
Yeah, so obviously, Mervyn, 86 years old, owns 261 acres right along the Route 81 corridor. So highly visible piece of
For
property, highly
sure.
desirable in terms of conversion into some other use. In this particular case, starting to see the explosion of data centers along some of these corridors and was approached there. Um, and while Mervyn was willing to give up, $15 million, for selling his farm to the data center, he was really committed to ensure that these farms remain open and available for agriculture. He grew up in the area. He didn't grow up specifically on these farms, but acquired them, and they were part of his life. It's where he had his career. He
Hmm.
references about when his wife passed away, like holding her on these
Hmm.
properties. So the properties are more than just monetary gain to him. They're
Right.
his legacy. It's been his life, and his commitment to ensuring that those farms remain there again, for future generation. So that's how we got connected with Mervyn. He wanted to be compensated. And fortunately, in Silver Spring Township, because they have this open space fund, they can pay landowners the full appraised value of their development rights, which, for Mervyn, fairly high in this particular area, nowhere close to $15 million. But he was still able to preserve these two farms, realize his dream of seeing these farms remain available for, the next farmer, but still was able to walk away with $2 million from preserving his farm. Which, in his testimony at 86, $2
Yeah.
million is
Yeah, it's
more than enough money that I
not
need,
nothing. Yeah.
right.
I appreciate that you've done this for a while, but this example that you are laying out here, what is it like to talk to a person like this? Admittedly, the guy's 86 and he's probably, you reach that point in life where you know that you have more behind you than ahead of you.
Yeah.
And I'm not diminishing any of his life experiences here, but I mean, potentially walking away from 13, 14 million bucks, right?
Yeah.
All because of a matter of principle
Mhm.
rather than having a huge
Correct.
payday. And I know you deal with this on a daily basis,
Mhm.
but do you ever hang up with some of these people and be like, dang, wow.
You, I've often said, um, so let me frame this out a bit. So at Lancaster Farmland Trust, in our normal course of doing business, so absent a Silver Spring Township, but our normal, course of doing business, we're never compensating landowners 100% of the
Hmm.
appraised value of their development rights. Currently, right now, we're averaging about 35%.
Okay.
So, that's 65% of value that these families are giving up. They're just giving it up. And it's striking to me that it is that land ethic, and I think it's very unique and it's very iconic in a place like Lancaster County that there's this land ethic that I don't think we necessarily see and experience in other places. And it's, this decision that these families are willing to give up, what is essentially hundreds of thousands of dollars, potentially millions of dollars, because as you referenced, out of principle that they want to make sure that this farm stays open and available for a family member. Or I've had Amish farmers say to me, I don't know if anyone at my family is going to want to farm this, but I want to make sure it's available for the community. So
Mm.
we experience this, on a daily basis working with farm families who it's more important, and it's not always their legacy. It's just this commitment to the land. It's this ethic that they have of, you know, at this moment in time, I'm the steward of this piece of property. While my name is on the deed, I don't necessarily own it. It's here for the community, and I want to make sure it stays here for the community. And it's a very humbling experience to work with these folks. And I've often thought to myself, given the same circumstances, I don't know if I could make that decision. It's hard to put yourself in their shoes, um, when they're giving up what could be substantial monetary gain, and they are happy to do it, and they are smiling at the end of the day that they're permanently preserving their farm.
You have two kids, right?
I have two kids. Yep.
That's what would go through my mind. We also have two kids. And when you're sitting there, that is a real test of principle.
It
When you
is.
know that you could set up your kids for life, really, with
Yeah.
with something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really remarkable. And we see it day in and day out, and it's just this, you know like I said, I think it's very unique to Lancaster County. And it's, we're blessed here. We have the most productive non-irrigated soils in the entire United States. We got good infrastructure to support it. So I think farmers, can envision that, agriculture is going to remain a viable industry here. But even if it seems like it's not, there's still this commitment to the land.
Jeff, thank you so much. Really appreciate the insight into this process and learning a lot more about what you all do. We really appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate the opportunity. We like to talk about Lancaster Farmland Trust. We like to, honor the farmers who've made this commitment, ensuring that, our agricultural land is going to be here for future generations. So we appreciate the opportunity.
For more information about the Lancaster Farmland Trust and to read more about Mr. Rodabaugh Jr., check out the American Farmland Owner newsletter. It's free, it comes out every Friday, and it's the place where landowners get their news about industry thought leaders with the hopes, the challenges, and the trends in farmland ownership and investment. You can check it out right now at AmericanFarmlandOwner.com. Thanks for joining us this week for the podcast, and thanks for caring about the future of our farmland.